Hey there, kiddos, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Uncle Frank, and that you are having a great day. And in today's video, I'd like to sit back in my very comfortable chair, relax, and have a little conversation with all of you guys about permanence and the status quo and time, and the fact that time really does change things, and you can't look to the future with the knowledge you have now or the knowledge of the past and expect that knowledge to still hold true, to still be true a decade out. Okay? Today I'd like to talk about this bad boy, not the Sega Genesis itself, but Sega itself as a console manufacturer, as a mainstay of the video game home console market. This bad boy is the Sega Genesis, a 16-bit retro console, old as hell. It came out, I believe, in 1988, and it is an absolute mainstay in retro video game collections. The Sega Genesis has some of the most iconic retro games on the market available for it. Of course, there's Sonic the Hedgehog, 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles. There's Vector Man. There's Toe Jam and Earl. Love me some Toe Jam and Earl. There's a lot of really cool stuff. Altered Beast. That's another great one. There's a lot of cool stuff for the console. This system is a powerhouse. And when it came out, it was a real contender for the title of best video game console, up there with the Super Nintendo, which was... The SNES was an interesting console. Equally awesome, equally goated library of games. And for a while, there was a genuine competition between Sega and Nintendo over who the top dog of the home video game console market would be, with occasional releases from other companies that didn't stick out as much compared to the absolute beast that was the Genesis and the SNES. Now, fast forward, a decade goes by, and that's a decade of strong competition between Sega and Nintendo, with not just great games on both sides of the aisle, but pretty solid consoles released too. By the time the new millennium rolls around, 1998 rolls around, okay? By this point, you know, the PlayStation and the N64 and the Sega Saturn, they're starting to phase out, and the next era of video game consoles is starting to come around. And by this point, the Genesis is already a fossil. It's been out for 10 years. No one's really playing with it anymore. And out comes the newest Sega box, the Dreamcast. And I'm going to be very honest. The Dreamcast is amazing as a console. It's got really good... Well, it's got good graphics, I think, for most of its games. It's got a great library of games. It's a pretty powerful box. It stands out, and it is, in my opinion, perhaps one of the strongest home video game consoles released at the turn of the millennium. And, like I said, it's got some pretty good games. Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 are on it. Some other good stuff too, but Sonic Adventure 1 and 2. It's got Crazy Taxi. I love that so much. Good stuff. The Dreamcast is a memorable console. And, you know, you'd think after a decade of strong rivalry between Sega and Nintendo, the Dreamcast would just be, like the GameCube, Sega's first step into the new millennium, the first step of many new consoles to come. In fact, if you were a video game enthusiast in 1999 and you saw the Dreamcast and you saw the games it had, you saw its competition, you'd be forgiven for thinking that Sega was as good as it's ever been. You know, sure, they've had some stumbling blocks along the way. The 32X, right? No, not the Sega CD was the bad one, right? No, they were both pretty awful. 32X was not great. Sega CD was not great. And the Sega Saturn wasn't impressive, if we're being honest. But the Dreamcast made it look like things were starting to turn around. And the games they had to offer were pretty impressive. But within just a few short years, the Dreamcast was by and large forgotten by the market. Its flagship titles, Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, loud cars just zip by. The flagship titles, Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, have been ported over. That's right. Sonic games were now on the GameCube, and that car is very loud, and it's like a mile away. I digress. Sonic games that were originally for the Dreamcast have been ported to the GameCube. By 2004, I think, actually, Sonic Adventure 1 was on the GameCube. And then Sonic Heroes was a Sonic game that was never on a Sega console. That's right. For 10 years. 10 years. A decade. Okay? An entire childhood can come and go in 10 years, right? Sega was the biggest competition for Nintendo. And then all of a sudden, for a variety of reasons, some of them Sega's fault, some of them not Sega's fault, if we're being honest, that changed, and they went from being a video game console company to just a video game studio. And the race between Sega and Nintendo ended with a clear winner, and it was not Sega. Now, why does this matter? Why am I bringing this up? Well, besides the fact that I like to talk about the Dreamcast whenever I have the opportunity, it is, after all, just a lovely little box. Do I like the Dreamcast more than I like the Genesis? It's hard to say. I like this more as a console, but I like the video game lineup of the Genesis more. It's got more iconic classics. But the Dreamcast is still dope, if I'm being very honest. I'm not just bringing this up to give you guys a little tirade about the Dreamcast and the Genesis and Sega as a company and how they lost the race. I'm bringing this up because for 10 years, from 1988 to 1998, there was a genuine belief that the rivalry between Sega and Nintendo could continue long into the future, and we could get awesome consoles and awesome games from both parties going forward. But all of a sudden that changed, and that was no longer the status quo. That was no longer the truth. That was no longer the way of the world. You know, things come and go all the time. And in the world of video games, comics, TCGs, whatever have you, the status quo can change abruptly, aggressively even, with very little warning, very little understanding. And sure, we can always look back. Okay, we can always look at the sales numbers and some controversies from the past to tell you why a console or why a game or why a TCG failed. We can always look back, and there's a slew. There's an entire articles upon articles on Wikipedia for why one thing or another thing or whatever have you failed and died and kicked the bucket and faded away as time marched forward. But in the moment, when history is playing out in front of you, you don't have the ability to look back at the past, to look at why it failed retrospectively. You don't have the gift of foresight, hindsight. You know, you can't look at the moment and say, oh, this is why things will not be the same 5 years from now. You can't do that. You can't see the future. No one can. You can guess the future to the best of your ability based on what information you have now. But information you have now might not be relevant 5-10 years from now. And I bring this up because, you know, as I say on the channel a lot, you know, it's easy to say what you're going to do. It's easy to say what you think a game or a card or a single or a sealed product is going to do 5-10 years from now. But to actually predict it and be right more often than you're wrong is a nigh impossibility, in my opinion. And, you know, I think it's important that while you can always hope for the best, it's best that you prepare for the worst and approach things like the TCG market, the video game retro market, comic books, etc., whatever hobbies you're interested in buying, selling, collecting, etc., you approach it with an understanding that while things could be going great right now, They might not be in the future. Uh, Pokey Annie put out a really great video the other day, um, talking about how difficult it can be to sell Pokemon products and why it might be a good idea to sell it at a not amazing price right now, instead of holding on to it until it's a bazillion dollars a box and might be more difficult to sell, because it can be more difficult to sell. And one thing he mentioned, he put out two videos on the subject. One thing he said in either of the videos really resonated with me, and it was the idea that, you know, you don't know what the future is going to look like. You don't know what the future of the Pokemon market's going to look like. Yeah, it's good now, but will it be 10 years from now? Will the Pokemon market be the absolute juggernaut that it is right now in a decade? I don't know. Turn of the millennium. Was Sega the juggernaut that it was for a decade? Be truthful. It wasn't. Now, this is not me doom posting about Pokemon or shitting on Sega. I love Sega. I think Sega has some really great consoles and some amazing games under their library, and I think Pokemon and the Pokemon market is pretty great. In fact, I personally believe that the Pokemon TCG is going to continue long after I'm gone, and it's just a fact of the world, I think, because there is a lot of appeal to it. But it's not just about the Pokemon TCG, it's about markets in general. Pokemon, Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh! Things can change, and whenever someone out there puts out a video talking about their beliefs about things worth worrying about in the current status quo, people like to respond to it by talking about the current status quo. Oh, on my other channel, I griped often. I don't do it anymore. I don't post on that channel anymore. But on the other channel, I used to talk a lot about my issues and my gripes with Magic the Gathering, because there was a lot going on with that game that I did not enjoy a whole lot. And every so often, I would get people telling me I'm being upset over nothing. I'm rage baiting. I'm doom posting because Magic's great. Universes Beyond hasn't done any damage to the game. Fire Design hasn't done any damage to the game. And then I like to look back at those posts. Yeah, they haven't done any damage in the moment. The Walking Dead Universes Beyond was not a problem because it was just like 5 cards. Now, half of every set that comes out is Universes Beyond, and longtime fans are not happy. There's genuine anger and market stress over Universes Beyond. 2019 was a little over 5 years ago, 7 years ago, something like that. Not a full decade ago. And in the time it's taken from then to now for Universes Beyond to have a serious impact on the not just the health of the game as a game, but also the health of the game as a collectible, an investment, a sealed product that you buy, sell, and flip and trade, and all that jazz. It's very tangible because there's a very clear effect that Universes Beyond products have had on the game, not just for the secondary market, but how Wizards of the Coast as a company prices their product. You'll notice Universes Beyond product is more expensive on average out the gate compared to the regular Wizards of the Coast product. That's by design. Wizards has to pay more. So, for the licensing fees, I should say. Wizards has to pay more, so they have to recoup some of that loss with the actual sealed product. They put out more sealed product to try and cover their losses when it comes to the fees. So there's more releases, there's more price hikes, everything's more expensive, there's more of it. But in 2019, or not 2019, 2020, I think? It was 2020. When was The Walking Dead Universes Beyond? It might have been 2020. My mistake. It was right after Secret Lair first launched as a product. It was like, I think 6 months after Secret Lair launched. So sorry, not 2019, probably 2020. Point is, it's not been that long since Universes Beyond was first introduced. And at the time, I was told that I was worrying over nothing. I was being upset over nothing. But here we are with set and collector boxes that cost an arm and a leg. Some selling 6 months post-release or at release for $1,000. People were spending real money on Final Fantasy and Spider-Man at release. That's just a fact. And looking back, it's easy to say I told you so. But of course I couldn't have predicted what Final Fantasy was going to be priced at based on what I knew at the time of The Walking Dead. That'd be crazy. You know, I can't see the future. All I can see was that I thought Walking Dead was a bad direction to take the game in. I could not have possibly predicted $1,000 Final Fantasy boxes, $1,000 Lord of the Rings boxes. It's crazy. I couldn't have predicted serialized cards. I couldn't have predicted a lot. You know, and the same is true for every other game. You know, it's easy to say, oh, Pokemon's in a great spot right now. Look at how much a Destined Rivals box is, or look how cool all the cards from Perfect Order are. The Meowth is great and all that jazz. You know, it's easy to say in the moment, oh, the Pokemon market's doing great. It's going to continue to do great. The Yu-Gi-Oh market's kind of stagnant. It's going to continue to be stagnant. But those facts are only true in the moment. In the future, when 5 years, 10 years, whatever comes along, it comes knocking, you're going to look back and you're going to wonder how much of it you actually got right. And not all of it's going to be correct. You know, part of why I don't talk too much about why I think you guys should buy this box or that box or whatever on the channel is because, one, that's not the kind of channel I am. You know, I'm not really a financials channel. I like to talk about the market, but I don't like to talk about financials. I don't like to, you know, put on blast, hey, I'm buying this, or you guys should buy that, because it always has that certain kind of feel to it when people talk like that. And, you know, no foul towards those who do. More power to you, especially if you're well knowledgeable and are trying your best to actually help your audience. Good faith and all that jazz. But personally, I don't think I don't know, I never feel really comfortable talking about that kind of stuff here on the channel. But the other reason I don't do it is, even if I'm right 99% of the time, you know, if I put out a video daily talking about why the Yu-Gi-Oh! Limited Pack 2025 is a great purchase because it's such a cool product and the Exodia in it is great. If I put out a video talking about why Twilight Masquerade is going to secretly become the next Pokemon box to climb up to $6,000, or why you guys should really go back and buy every Spider-Man collector booster box because the Marvel set's coming and it's going to raise the price tag of the existing Marvel set a bazillion dollars. You know, I could be right on all of those, right? And I could, you know, myself make a lot of money, and a bunch of people who follow my advice can make a bunch of money. But 99% correctness does not mean the people who follow my advice 100% of the time are going to get out lucky. They're going to get screwed over, and then of course it's going to be on me. But more to the point, I'm not going to be correct 99% of the time. Hell, if I make predictions on this channel every single day about what I think is a good set, what I think is a good product, what I think is a good buy, and all that jazz, if I did that every day, I'd be lucky if I was right 40% of the time, 30% of the time. Because, like I said, you can't see the future. You can make guesses based on what you know right now, but you do not know everything. You can't know everything. It's just a fact of life. So I'm going to wrap it up there. Hope you guys enjoyed my little history lesson with ye old Sega. This was a fun one for me, mostly because I got to dig out my Sega Genesis. I should play the Dreamcast more often, but I've already played all the games I've got for it, so maybe, I guess, more Crazy Taxi? I don't know. Fun stuff. But yeah, you know, always just be careful in making broad assumptions about the future, because you never know what's going to change from now to then. Just be careful. This was another long one. I don't mean to ramble on so long for these videos, mostly because I know that you guys don't actually enjoy it that much when I ramble, but it is what it is. Got to get that stuff off my chest. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you made it this far, bully good on you. I appreciate you guys giving me your attention and time of day. Please like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. Check out the Discord, the Patreon, the TCG player link. All that helps me out. Much appreciated. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Ciao!